At this point, if you live in a major city and don't have Titan insurance, you're just asking for trouble. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. As part of my MonsterVerse review series, today I'm going to be talking about the 2021 monster movie sequel, Godzilla vs. Kong. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all that extra content. Godzilla vs. Kong stars Alexander Skarsgård, Rebecca Hall, and Brian Tyree Henry, and was directed by Adam Wingard. Following several years of peace, Godzilla mysteriously reappears, which sets into motion a series of events that leads to a clash of titanic proportions. Godzilla vs. Kong is a popcorn action blockbuster through and through. I know the term popcorn movie frequently has negative connotations because it's generally applied to shut off your brain type movies, but you know what? Sometimes that's exactly the type of movie you need. And that's exactly the type of movie that Godzilla vs. Kong is. It's big, dumb action spectacle. It's not going for any awards. It's not trying to deliver some profound message. It's pure entertainment. You go into a movie called Godzilla vs. Kong for one thing, to see Godzilla fight King Kong, for big monster movie spectacle. And Godzilla vs. Kong delivers on that expectation. We're now 4 movies into the MonsterVerse, and they've finally fixed the biggest issue that's been plaguing the franchise from the start: the humans. Okay, so maybe fixed is a little too strong of a word, but they significantly improved upon the humans. So how'd they do that? By reducing them. Reducing their importance, reducing their screen time, reducing their involvement in the story. Despite their names, all of the other movies in the MonsterVerse up until now have focused on human stories, with all the monster stuff happening within the context of that human story. Godzilla vs. Kong is the first movie where the monsters are the focus. The humans are only there to provide context to that monster story. They're just a means to an end, and the movie rightfully treats them like it. That being said, there's certainly still some stuff going on with humans in this movie. The primary human plot dealing directly with the Titans, and then a secondary plot trying to solve a mystery of sorts. Although ridiculous, as I'll talk about in a minute, I actually enjoyed the primary human plot, and thought that it worked well as a means of supporting the monster aspect of the film. There's a young character named Gia, who in particular really adds some meaningful context to the story, and enhances our understanding and feelings about the monsters. The secondary human plot is not quite as effective, and is a bit closer to the iffy human stuff we've seen in the previous films. It's not bad, and gives us important information, while also being somewhat funny, but it feels a little shoehorned in as a way to give a character from a previous film something to do. So I mentioned that elements of this movie were a little ridiculous. Now, that probably comes as no surprise, considering we're talking about a movie with giant radioactive monsters, but this movie goes that little bit further into absurdity. This is a spoiler-free review, so I'm not going to get into any specifics here, but let's just say this movie takes things into a bit more of a sci-fi realm than what we've seen with the previous films. It's not completely out of the blue, since these things were hinted at in the earlier films, but it still feels quite different from what we've seen before. So I can see this one stretching some people's already extended suspension of disbelief. It's ridiculous, but if you kind of just go with it, it's extremely entertaining. Speaking of entertaining, we've obviously got to talk about the monster aspects of this film. In spite of some other inconsistencies among the films of the MonsterVerse, all of these movies have had fantastic visuals. The CGI has ranged from very good to excellent, and the creature design has consistently been one of the most impressive elements of these films. Godzilla vs. Kong somehow still manages to improve on all of that. As I've said in my reviews of the earlier films, we're talking about massive green screen effects or frequently entirely digital creations. But if you're okay with that, they're amazing to look at. The locations are phenomenal. Godzilla and Kong both look even more impressive and realistic than they have in the previous movies, and this film is just an absolute visual spectacle. Now, of course, I can't talk about a movie called Godzilla vs. Kong without talking about the titanic battles. The monster fights, showdowns, and just general destruction scenes have been the highlights of the MonsterVerse films, and Godzilla vs. Kong certainly does not disappoint in this regard. It absolutely delivers on its promised Godzilla vs. King Kong showdown. Several times, in fact. Again, this is a spoiler-free review, so I'm not going to talk about the outcome of these fights or who won or anything like that, but wow. If you like the battle sequences of any of the other MonsterVerse movies, you are going to love the Godzilla and Kong battles. They're visually spectacular in terms of the CGI, in terms of the camera movements and creativity of the shots, and perhaps best of all, they're long and aren't constantly intercut by unnecessary human reaction shots. So, yeah, Godzilla vs. Kong is a huge popcorn movie. If you're looking for an intelligent, thought-provoking piece of cinema, this probably isn't going to do it for you. But if you come into Godzilla vs. Kong wanting to see a giant radioactive lizard fighting a giant ape, then this is exactly the movie for you. It takes many of the best elements of the previous MonsterVerse films, cuts out many of the worst elements, and leaves you with a big, dumb action spectacle and a big, dumb smile on your face. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. The biggest pro has gotta be the Godzilla vs. Kong fights. I realize that's literally the most obvious thing to bring up, but they're easily the best components of this film. Which is good, because that's obviously the draw of a film called Godzilla vs. Kong. But really, they're just so enjoyable. Big kaiju fights have been done more times than we could count at this point. And while almost always entertaining, I find that they get a little repetitive sometimes. Big, slow punch, monster crashes into building, building falls down, switch, rinse and repeat. And we do get some of that classic giant monster fight stuff here, but I was really impressed with the creativity of these fights. There are multiple fights, and they're all pretty long, but I never found myself getting bored with them or finding them redundant. The second pro is related to the first, and is the visuals. I know I'm starting to sound like a broken record with the MonsterVerse on this point, but they're just so visually spectacular, and this film is no different. Whether we're talking about scenes involving both humans and the monsters, or entirely digital creations of just the monsters in digital environments, this movie is a joy to look at. The creatures look as good as ever, and it's got a great array of locations, including a fantastically neon-infused Hong Kong, which serves as a setting for a particularly luminescent battle. Pro number 3 has gotta be Kong. I'm a big fan of Kong in this franchise, as you could probably tell, and I really enjoyed just about everything they did with his character in this movie. They greatly expanded on him here, leaping off from the information and insight we got in Kong Skull Island. To keep this spoiler-free, I can't really say anything of real specificity or substance, but suffice it to say that the moments with Kong were all of my favorite moments in this movie. On the con side, the biggest issue was how ridiculous the movie gets at points. I fully recognize the absurdity of calling a kaiju film out for its ridiculousness, and truthfully, it didn't seriously impact my enjoyment of the film, but there were elements of the plot that just went a step too far into sci-fi without being able to reasonably justify the jump. Again, it sounds ridiculous saying it without the context of certain plot points, but I think you'll know what I mean when you see the movie. The second con is something that honestly wasn't personally a con for me, but I can definitely see being a con for some people, and is the unbalanced focus of this film. Some of the previous movies in the MonsterVerse suffered from this issue, but the unbalanced nature always came down to humans versus the monsters. Here, this lack of focal balance is within the monsters. We've got a movie featuring Godzilla and King Kong, but they don't get equal screen time or equal story focus, and that'll likely irritate about 50% of people watching this movie. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Godzilla vs. Kong or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Godzilla vs. Kong 3.5 out of 5 paws. Although the story's a little ridiculous and a little obvious, this film delivers on the promise of Godzilla and Kong big time, featuring some visually spectacular and incredibly entertaining fights. I would recommend Godzilla vs. Kong to anybody looking for a big popcorn blockbuster action movie. Whether you're scarfing down movie theater popcorn or some microwave popcorn at home, if you want to watch two giant monsters fighting, this is the big action spectacle film you've been waiting for. Existing fans of Legendary's MonsterVerse will also get quite a bit of enjoyment out of this movie. One of the two titular monsters gets the Titans' share of story focus, but both Godzilla and Kong shine here. If you liked Godzilla vs. Kong, I would recommend Kong Skull Island. Not only is it our only other MonsterVerse film to date that features Kong, but it's also the movie that introduces some very important and relevant concepts that are expanded upon here in this film. And while still quite different, I would argue that it's the MonsterVerse film that's most similar to this one. If you like the big kaiju action here, you've got to check out Pacific Rim. It features some more big popcorn movie monster action, and it also includes some similar plot elements. And if you just can't get enough Godzilla and Kong, you have to watch King Kong vs. Godzilla. It was only the third movie in Toho's Godzilla franchise, and was the first on-screen meeting between these two titans. The story and outcomes are a bit different, but if you want some old-school classic Godzilla vs. Kong, it's hard to go wrong with this one. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Godzilla vs. Kong? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, Team Godzilla or Team Kong? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe or add it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainely Movies, the way life should be.